Hey YouTubers, I got a little bit of a different video today. I wanted to get some new speaker cables and I found a pair of Tara Labs Prism Helix 6 speaker wires on eBay at a really nice price. I bought them knowing they were going to be too long. These are 4 meters long and it's way more than I need. And so even after making sure I had plenty of slack in the cable for it to lay on the ground easily and leaving a little bit of extra room in case I ever move my amplifier higher up in the rack, I still have at least 4 feet too much wire. And I don't want to coil up extra wire, so I'm going to shorten these today. I've already done one, and so let me walk you through the process. And this will be helpful if you are either terminating new speaker wires, or if, like me, you're going to take all of this apart here and reassemble it where it looks factory and where you still have an excellent electrical connection. So let me walk you through the process. So here's what the inside of the wire looks like, and you've got 6 solid core conductors in there, 3 positive, 3 negative, and some spacing in there to keep the two from interfering with one another electrically, and some decorative weave on the outside. And I really did debate about whether I wanted to take that off, but I'm going to go ahead and leave it on there. It's very stiff since it's solid core wire, and that poses a real challenge dealing with it, but it's not insurmountable. Here's what's going on underneath the speaker pants. You can see that they've got them twisted together, and of course here's where I cut off the banana plugs. And like I say, I'm going to reuse everything that they had installed, and you can see there's a little bit of corrosion here. This wire is old. It's not the oxygen-free wire that we have today, but it's still an excellent speaker cable, and so I'm going to check both ends and make sure there's no corrosion on the end that I'm not shortening, and we'll go ahead and get started. Now this is a directional wire. There's a particular end that they want you to connect to the amplifier and the other end to the speaker. I don't know that that makes much difference personally, but I'm going to abide by that, and I'm going to shorten the amplifier end on both cables. So first thing we need to do is I marked right here, we need to make a cut. And this is going to be the scariest part of the whole thing, because if you get this wrong, well, then you could get in trouble. Got some nice cutters here, should make a good clean cut. And there we go. So here's the end that used to connect to the amplifier, and this is on my short piece of wire. So I'm going to need to remove and reuse these solder-on banana plugs, and I want to reuse the speaker pants here. Now this is just heat shrink tubing here on the ends, and so I'll need to go ahead and remove that. It'll make desoldering these a little easier, and I'll show you why in just a moment. But first of all, let me get those off of there. I want to be careful not to cut the speaker pants. I just want to get in here and see if I can slice that and peel it off. I can't pull the speaker pants off over these, and I don't want to cut it here because that's going to make pulling the wire out of the banana plug more difficult. So I'm going to push the speaker pants back a little bit and make my cut a little further in. That way I can pull on these wires to get them out of there when I desolder that. I say these are really thick solid core conductors. Now I can pull my speaker pants off, and I don't need this short piece anymore. All right, the next step in the process is I need to pull these wires out of here and clean this out so I can reuse this banana plug. Now, I wish I had something I could use as an insulator between the banana plug and the vise, because the vise is going to act like a giant heat sink and draw the heat away from this. So it's going to make things more difficult, but this is the best I've got. I thought about putting a block of wood in here to clamp down on this, but I think the wood would just catch on fire, so I'm going to do it this way. I did desolder the first ones using a soldering iron, and it is possible, but I found that this little torch does a much better job, does it very quickly. So we're just going to fire up the torch and get the tip of that flame right there. And We're just going to heat this up, and I'm applying a little bit of tension on these wires, and it should let go here in a moment. There we go. Now, there's a good bit of solder I'd like to remove from there, and I have some solder wicking material that I could stuff in there and heat that and try and get this to soak up the solder, but honestly, it's quicker and easier just to use a drill bit that will fit inside of there and just drill out the excess solder. And there we go. And that's cool enough to touch now. So I've got the majority of the solder out of there. I'm going to clean this up with some acetone because there's a good bit of flux left over from when it was soldered before. And so I cleaned that up real good with some acetone, and this is ready to reuse. Repeat the process on the other one. Okay, a little acetone or nail polish remover. You see that brown there? That's extra rosin from the old solder. See, that comes off pretty easily. We're going to get all of that out of there. It helps the solder flow and make a good connection, but it's unattractive and can encourage corrosion. So we want to get all of that off that we can. All right, and do the other one. Okay, now we're going to turn our attention to the cutoff end of the wire that needs to be prepared for termination. And first thing we're going to do is we're going to measure back. Now remember, there's about 3/4 of an inch of wire that's up inside that banana plug. So we're going to add that right here. So this part of the wire will end up in the banana plug, and we need to trim this back about here. So I'm just going to make a little mark here with the Sharpie. And we're going to trim back the insulation and expose the blue and white wires from here down. So the first thing we're going to do is just very, very gently cut off this mesh. I don't want to go too deep because the conductor is actually very close to the edges of this wire. And like I said, this is made more difficult because this wire is so stiff. It's as stiff as the wiring inside your house's walls. This is a bit like one of those little Chinese finger traps. If you tug on it from the end, it won't move. If you push on it, it slides right off. All right, the next step is we need to get this black cable off. And remember, our conductors are right on the outside edge of this, so we want to be careful and just barely cut through this. Remember, take your time here. There we go. All right, that comes off. We unbraid some more material, and here's where a pair of scissors comes in handy. Just going to snip that off. We don't need it. Now, we've got 3 blue conductors. I kind of bend that off to the side. Now remember, this is solid wire. If I bend this back and forth too many times, it'll break. So I want to be careful with it. We've got our 3 white on the opposite side. We've got 6 of these little plastic fillers, and we've got this rope-like material in the middle to remove. This cable was made in a 6-conductor version and an 8-conductor version, and they may have even made a 12-conductor version where all of these would be wires. All right, let's go ahead and trim these little plastic fillers out of here. We don't need them. That's it. Go ahead and get the 3 on the other side. All right. Now I'm going to see if scissors will cut this rope, or maybe you know what, I think this would probably do a better job if I can get in there. Don't worry about this. This is all going to be hidden. Nobody will see it. Move that trash out of the way. Now we can see on the original wire, this mesh was glued down to the black jacket so it doesn't move around. So we're going to glue it down as well. I'm just going to go around this with a very small bead of super glue all the way around. Now I've got a little rubbing alcohol here, and that will help the glue set right away. They do make special super glue accelerators, but rubbing alcohol works just fine. So we're going to give that a moment to activate, and then we'll move on to the next step. The next thing I want to do, this was not under the original speaker cable, but I think it's a good idea. I'm going to put a little piece of heat shrink tubing around this to make sure this doesn't move any. And so let's go ahead and put that on next. And got a little heat gun here. You could do this with a Bic lighter or something like that, but the heat gun is a little easier to control, and you don't get soot on things, so I prefer to use a heat gun when I can. We're going to shrink that down. Between the glue and that heat shrink, I don't think that's going to go anywhere. Now, the next thing we need to do is go ahead and slide on our speaker pants. We've glued down the mesh, we put some heat shrink tubing over the end, we've got our wires twisted, and we're trying to line them up nice and straight so the wires will slide down the pants legs easily. There we go. I have a hard time getting started. This is one of the more frustrating parts sometimes. We're going to push that down as far as it'll go. And it's going to be a little snug because I've got heat shrink tubing here that they didn't originally have from the factory. Just going to continue to work that down. And I need a little bit more wire exposed here, so I'm just going to grab some pliers and push that down a little bit. Same thing over here. Okay, there we go. Now all we have left to do is strip these wires, reinstall the banana plugs, and put new heat shrink tubing over them. So let's get with it. Now it's up to you. You can do this before you put the wire pants on, but sometimes the bare wire ends catch on the pants, and it's better to leave the insulation on and do this after. And I didn't take enough off of that one. Let's get a little bit more material exposed here. Here we go. We're now ready to tin these and then resolder the banana plugs on. Okay, now do use a good quality electronic solder. Don't use solder designed for plumbing. For a little bit extra, you can buy some nice Cardis audio solder that's made specifically for audio soldering. It has a good rosin in it, and it's less corrosive, and so and it also has a high silver content, so I recommend it. All right, now then, first thing I want to do is see, do I need to trim some wire off? I may have these longer than I need them. Yeah, I could stand to take a little bit off of that, so let's go ahead and do that. That looks good. Now, the first thing I need to do is get some solder on this bare copper here before I insert it in there. And for that, I prefer to use a soldering iron. Now my tip is nice and clean. And so just gonna heat this up a little bit. It's a pretty snug fit in that conductor. I don't want to just booger it up with a lot of solder. I just want to get enough on there. So when I get it in there and I start applying heat, the solder that's on the wire and the solder that's in the connector will bond quickly. So go ahead and insert that in here. Okay, I've got some red and black heat shrink tubing, but we need to change a couple of things. First of all, this is a little bit longer than what's on there. So we're just going to grab some scissors and trim that to about the same length. Do the same here. Trying to work around the camera here. All right, now, the other thing is, this has writing on it, which I don't care for, but it's easy to remove. Grab a little bit of our fingernail polish remover here. And that writing comes right off. Just like that. All right, the last step is to put the heat shrink tubing on. Now make sure you're aware of your polarity. The blue is negative on these wires. So I'm going to slide that on, and I'm going to do it as close to what's on the other end as possible. And they have that coming right up to the very end of the banana connector. Just like that. And this one goes on here. Just like that. Hit that with the heat gun. Now, if I can bend the other end of the wire up here, we'll compare. Here's the original connection. Here's the ones I just did. Pretty good match, I'd say. Okay, guys, thanks for watching. I hope you find this helpful. Pardon the sweat here. It's 92 degrees and 80% humidity in the garage today. But I really wanted to get this knocked out. And here's the final product. Now, this was the factory conductor that I left alone, and this is the one that I cut about 4 feet out of the cable and reinstalled everything. And you can see that the red heat shrink tubing here is a little bit different color, but other than that, they look the same. They should perform the same or better since there was some corrosion under here. I did contemplate removing the heat shrink tubing from this end and checking for corrosion. But I'm just not going to worry about it. It's very little, and I don't think it's going to have any effect on the sound quality. So it's hot out here. I'm done. I hope you found this helpful. Please like and subscribe if you did. Thanks.